InspirED Virtual Learning Series. Welcome to InspirED. The InspirED Virtual Learning Series brings you information and resources on a variety of topics to help support learning and successful outcomes for students and families. Whether you're an educator supporting students with disabilities, an administrator providing resources to educators, or a family member, InspirED is for you. The content of this webinar has been pre-recorded, but we want to encourage your participation. If you have any questions or comments, we invite you to be part of the discussion by using the chat feature. Questions will be answered throughout the webinar, and later, we'll be providing a link in the chat to a brief survey. By completing the survey, you'll be able to access a certificate verifying your attendance in this webinar. Connecting and exchanging ideas is key to inspiring success. InspirED was created by the Ohio Department of Education's Office for Exceptional Children and OCALI. Welcome, and thanks for joining us.
Welcome to InspirED Virtual Learning Series, PBIS Lessons Learned, Part 1, District Leadership. I'm Carly McVeigh, Senior Director at OCALI. This episode will explore the benefits of district-wide PBIS implementation and how it fits within a broader multi-tiered system of supports, how districts can engage various stakeholders while maintaining focus and fit with district priorities, and learnings from other districts that have continuously improved their processes across multiple years of implementation. I am joined by Lisa Zelvey, Coordinator of Pupil Support Services from Sycamore Community Schools. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, everyone. Excited to be here. I'm Lisa Zelvey, the Coordinator of Pupil Support Services at Sycamore Community Schools. I started in the district 10 years ago as an assistant principal at the junior high school, and 5 years ago was given this awesome opportunity to move into this role over at our district office. I've always had an interest in behavior education and supporting students with behavioral needs. I'm a special educator by trade, started in the classroom working with students with behavior disorders. I'm a mom to two awesome boys most days. I'm always the mom, but they're not always awesome. And really just excited and passionate about PBIS and the work that we're doing here and the opportunity to help others with the work.
So, Lisa, we know that PBIS implementation is a continuous improvement process. Let's start this conversation with a look at the early years before we talk about how it evolved. When did your district first initiate the work, and how did you roll it out?
So back when I was in the building, so it's probably been 7 years, maybe 8 years ago, as legislation was changing and PBIS was becoming law, our district rolled out PBIS as a requirement, and buildings were asked to engage in training. So they did. We all sent a team to the state support team, and we were all trained. And then there was support and some guidance from the district office level, but buildings were really left to kind of make sense of what they had learned in training and then apply it into their own environments.
Now, you mentioned that your role changed in the process, right? So from the time that the district initiated its PBIS implementation to now, your role has changed. Can you talk about how your role changed and what was the impact on your implementation?
Sure. So up until 5 years ago, I was the assistant principal in the building for our 7th and 8th graders and was able to lead the building level team on looking at our implementation. 5 years ago, the district office created a position, this coordinator of pupil support services, at the time was called a supervisor position, but it is an administrative role with an emphasis on mental health services and supports, PBIS, behavior education, and intervention. And so I moved over to district office 5 years ago and began to support this work at a district level at that point in time.
Okay. And so you're operating at a district level. Can you talk about how you interface with your district leadership team and, what is the role of that team in your PBIS implementation?
So our district leadership team, when we use that term here, we're really talking about the superintendent, assistant superintendent, and our directors. There are some other coordinators at this level as well. And that team meets regularly and talks about the work of PBIS. Certainly it started at a place around the legislation, right? What is the requirement and are we compliant with the requirements? Now we're at a place in my 5th year in this role where we're having deeper conversations. How do we integrate the work of PBIS? How is the curriculum department, as an example, using that language around PBIS when meeting with teams and talking about curriculum? How is business operations able to incorporate PBIS into their entities, like our bus drivers? And then certainly through the Office of Student Services, we're talking about PBIS and its ability to help decrease over-identification or misidentification of students with behavior disorders when we start talking about especially special education identification. So our district leadership team is incredibly supportive of the work. And our superintendent is a face out there telling our staff, it's not just that we're required to do this work. We believe in this work. This creates positive culture in our buildings and our classrooms and creates a place where our kids want to go to school. So that's been a huge step in our evolution that, again, our superintendent changed a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And our previous superintendent was very supportive of the work, and our current superintendent is really continuing that and continuing to go deeper as we learn more.
So that district coordination is really essential in ensuring that there's some consistency right across your buildings, and then kind of as your students move through the buildings and up, K through 12, and I should say pre-K through 12, really, right? Like we've seen certainly in recent years that there's just more and more of that emphasis on that pre-K level. So can you talk about, we understand that you have a district committee, or is that what it's called? It's a PBIS district committee that you use to help do that. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, so we do have what we call a district PBIS committee. It really is a district leadership team around the work of PBIS. So it has evolved over the last 5 years of me being in this role. So in my first year, we met quarterly face-to-face and really tried to focus on just learning. And it was pretty generalized around PBIS. In my second year, which was the year that we ended up closing in March, that year we met remotely for 1 hour quarterly with a real focus on a learning topic related actually to the tiered fidelity inventory. And the feedback from that was really positive, so much so that that committee said, we actually think we should meet in person. And we actually think we should dig deeper. So we started to do that work, and we stayed quarterly and remote for an additional year. We dug a little deeper, and then last year we were able to move back to face-to-face. So we did, but we met outside of the school day because we thought that would be more desirable and we wouldn't take teachers out of teaching time. Committee loved it. The problem was everyone had responsibilities outside of the school day. So we didn't have consistent attendance from all the people that really wanted to be there. But our emphasis in all of those district times together with that committee is really about professional learning and growth. If we're sharing out, we are sharing out how did we get here and why did we get here related to, as an example, the tiered fidelity inventory, so that our colleagues can learn from that and take that learning back into their buildings. We're really not spending that time to pair and share and talk about what we're currently doing. We do that in a different way, not during that district time. So now this year we have 3 delegates from each building who will come together. We will meet quarterly. And we're actually going to use our state support team to help us complete the district tiered fidelity inventory, build an action plan with a real focus on continuity within the district. We have 4 elementaries. They feed into 1 5th and 6th grade building. And then we have 1 7th and 8th grade building, 1 high school. So building continuity at the early ages is really important for us. But then also that continuous model grades 5 through 12. How do we make sure that kids don't feel like they're starting over or starting new around our language and our expectations and our instruction? So our district PBIS committee will really focus on that work this year.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, really, one of the key benefits and elements of PBIS is this consistency of expectations, right? So doing it within the building is not sufficient. It really, the more it's across the district, the better. Can you talk, I think to that end, can you talk about kind of how your district has evolved and is thinking about, if I go up a step, kind of like the umbrella of MTSS, right? So multi-tiered systems of supports, and how your thinking about that framework has evolved over time, the role of PBIS within that, And you had mentioned something about a couple of new positions that it sounds like are dedicated to that work.
Yeah, so one of the things we realized is that our district is really excellent at recognizing students need intervention, but we were different in the way in which we approached it in many of our buildings. So we're always intervening and supporting kids, but wouldn't it be nice if we all sort of followed a similar framework? With that, we recognize that our academic process and our behavioral process, wouldn't it be cool if they mirrored each other, right? So that we're not trying to teach two different processes to our staff and our faculty. So this year we have two MTSS specialists for the district. These are teachers on special assignment, and they are digging in with our principals and their leadership teams to really help build a consistent framework for MTSS. It's a 2-year role throughout the district. So our K4s are collaborating around what each of them has been doing exceptionally well and finding ways to bring all of that together to create one strong framework for our K4s, because that's the only area that we have 4 separate buildings. And then again, how does that merge and support the work getting into our 5th and 6th grade building and all the way up?
Can you talk some more about staff buy-in and how that has changed from those early days to what you see now?
Yeah, when you talk about engagement, you can't do any of this work if the teachers don't believe the work is valuable, because they're boots on the ground, right? We can talk as district leaders all day long and be talked about because we know that teachers get frustrated, right? It feels like a top-down mandate. It feels like yet another thing that's unfunded and required. And even just recently, one of our buildings did a survey, and about 19%, I think, of their staff responded that they feel like this is something that will probably go away yet again. So it's still out there, right? That people think this is just an initiative that's going to go away. So in the buildings that have been doing this the longest in our district, they really have found that teacher buy-in is fundamental. And that doesn't mean they always have it, right? As they're evolving and changing, there are certain things that they might propose that teachers really aren't, they're not feeling it. They're not feeling like that is the right direction to go. So a lot of staff conversations, all of our building teams have done a phenomenal job of having their tier 1 and tier 2 PBIS committees with cross-representation. So it is everything from content area teachers to special area teachers. In some buildings, we have preschool representation. We have related service providers. We have school counselors. They're really doing a phenomenal job of making sure that the stakeholder groups are at the table and represented. Some buildings are even moving into a model this year. I just supported a building yesterday where their building committee met. They identified a special project that needs to be done, and each grade level and the stakeholder group rep was going to go back to that stakeholder group and say, here's when the special project team is meeting and anyone is welcome to join. So really seeking teacher buy-in and teacher engagement in the process is critical. And our buildings that are doing it well, that's what they're finding, right? That teacher voice is the most important component. I would also say that staff learning has been important, and they have approached that in a multitude of ways. So it is not just come sit here and listen to why we have to do this. They've done a lot of data-rich conversations. They've really dug into their why. Why do we believe in PBIS? Not just why are we told to do it? And that to me has been really game-changing in our buildings. Why do we believe in it versus why are we doing it because we're told?
Yeah, and can you talk a little bit about some of that data? I know that your district, you have invested tremendously in having improved kind of data management systems, and then you just also like referenced it, but these really rich, deep conversations about the data and using it to examine really what's happening and what is the impact, like what makes you a believer, right, about PBIS?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, this is a district that is just incredibly passionate about instruction, content, and achievement. I mean, I don't know that there's such a district that isn't. We all say that, right? But we really are here. We're really committed to it. And I think that what we looked at was if we couldn't put data in front of our staff that supported, not that we had a problem, but that any student that is not engaged in the content that you're providing is a student we're missing. Right? So it's not about having this abhorrent problem that you have to address, because that's not us as a district. But we have students that engage in behavior that takes them away from learning. regularly, right? That's normal. That's what we're all going to have. So we did invest in a tool for kindergarten through sixth grade to support that. And so our teachers are tracking teacher managed behavior and office managed behavior, and they're looking at that instant graph regularly as a team, like a PBIS team, but then that PBIS team is bringing that back either to their grade levels or to their building and just saying, here's an awareness, here's how often we're acknowledging, here's how often we're referring, here's what we're referring for, and then really systemically trying to look at, is there something we can do whole building to address that? Then as we get into our upper grades, they're still working through what tool or system do we utilize in order to gather rich data. But what they are gathering, they are putting back out in front of their staff. And that 7-12 group really responded to seeing, if we have this many students going to the office for an average of this many minutes, this is how much instruction is being missed in these content area classes, and our electives, right? Kids' passion projects. If you get pulled out of class during math, which maybe isn't your favorite class, but now you miss all of band, you're also not getting the richness of the experience we want you to have, where you will buy into loving our school. And that has been super powerful. And that has created sort of the why. Why are we doing this work? But we really had to be careful here that we didn't have our teachers believing that we were engaging in the work of PBIS and believing in the framework because we had a problem, because nobody felt like we had a problem. Mm. So that was important language for us to say. This isn't about trying to fix something that is broken. This is about trying to enhance something that's already working quite well here for us. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that language becomes really important, right? Can you tell one of the other stakeholders that we know can have a valuable role within the PBIS implementation or community groups? Do you have any partnerships that you work with from within your community, and how do you bring them in?
So we do. We actually have 3 really strong and unique partnerships. So we work with Mindpeace, we work with Cincinnati Children's Hospital, and we work with 1 in 5. All 3 of those really are on that mental health side, or that mental health bucket, if people want to think of it in different silos. They're all organizations that support mental health education and services. But they do a lot to support both our staff and our student mental health, right? We were really focused on making sure that we're taking care of the people who are taking care of the people. And that's all part of your PBIS framework. So even though if you asked one of our staff members right now, do you have a PBIS structure or framework for staff? They would be like, I've never heard that before. In my role, I know that's part of it, right? Tier 1, got to take care of everybody. So we have everything from, like 1 in 5, as an example, does an educator series. So we share information out with our staff about how to access that and continue to support their growth and development, taking care of themselves. But then also bringing education into our building. So anything from the director of 1 in 5 sat on a student panel to bring more knowledge and information to them about mental health and mental health awareness, to our Cincinnati children's therapists will run lunch and learn sessions for some of our older students. Today I'm going to be talking about anxiety and strategies that help support students who experience that. And if you'd like to come and learn more, you can. One of our therapists at our junior high started a compliment exchange, where people were able to engage in acknowledging others for the great things they were doing as staff. So we're all kind of living it. And even today, I was just thinking of a funny story. My school resource officer, right? So I have a school resource officer at the high school, and I showed up and he said to me, Zelby, you're going to be so proud of me. I PBIS'd it today. And I was like, I didn't even know that was a verb, but tell me about it. And he said, I saw a student in the lunchroom who stuffed burgers in his pocket. So his intent was to steal. And he said, I could have waited for him to cross the threshold, not pay for it, and deal with it from a discipline standpoint, but I pre-corrected him. He said, I walked in with a tray and I said, how about we put everything on the tray so we aren't tempted to take something without buying it? Because once I walk across that threshold, I've stolen it if I didn't pay for it. And he said, the kid emptied his pockets, the old boy emptied his pockets onto the tray, and walked out paying for everything. It was kind of like, poof. And I said to him, I'm using this somewhere, and here it is. Here's my opportunity. I said, I'm going to talk about, again, that's a community organization. Our police engagement and our relationship with our local police department is excellent. But our police SROs have actually gone to training on PBIS in our buildings as well to learn more about the work that we're doing.
That's really cool to hear. That's
That was a super
exciting.
cool
Yeah,
moment.
that's
That was
great.
a super cool moment. Don't
That's
tell him I gave him props for it, though. It'll go to
Right, exactly. You can't let it go into his head, right?
no way.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, so I know we just have another minute or two left. So I'm really curious to hear from you. I mean, you've shared so much about your learnings and just the evolution of this process over time. I think, we all recognize that districts across the state are in various stages of their PBIS implementation. If you had a few things that you could communicate to them of like, whatever you do, don't do this, or whatever you do, do this, what would you say?
So in the don't do this, I would never stand in front of a district or a building and say, you will do this, period. It doesn't work. It's been tried other places. We learned from them. It didn't work. But on the must do or don't fail to do this, I would say a couple of things. First and foremost, anytime you are engaging your staff in learning, you need to make sure that the individual doing that teaching for your staff is engaging. We've gotten a lot of great feedback about presenters who really captivated the audience, and our teachers who have been able to walk away and say, I've been doing this 30 years, but gosh, I learned something today. Really important that the right people are in front of the people. The second thing I would say is really critical is embrace the crash and burn. It's always annoying to me when I go to different educational seminars and the people stand there and talk about how perfect it all is. And you're sitting there as an educator, like there's no way that's as perfect as they present it. I'm going to tell you right now, our buildings are crushing it, right? I have 7 buildings that are working so hard to make sure this work is done and done well for our students. But we have crashed and burned, and we will continue to crash and burn. And we know that. We just have to pick ourselves up and ask for forgiveness and grace from our staff and say, we tried it. It didn't work out, but here's what we learned, and here's how we'd like to apply it moving forward. And just seeking that grace from your buildings and putting that out there early on. We're going to try this. We're going to take your feedback, but we might fail. And if we fail, we know that we did it with the best interest of kids in mind, and we're going to keep making changes till we get it right for them. And I would say that's been our attitude, and we've certainly hit bumps and frustration along the way. But if you can't embrace that part of it, you will forever feel like you are chasing a unicorn. You'll never get there. You'll just never get there. So we know we've got work to do, but we know we've done a lot of great work in the time that we've been working on it.
Thank you. That was all really helpful information. All right, so here's what we're going to do. First, thank you for joining us for this episode. I do want to make sure that we share contact information with the people watching. This is live streaming, and it will be available on the website indefinitely. If someone is watching this and thinks, I have a couple of questions that I want to follow up with Lisa about, or certainly with me, don't hesitate. So again, my name, Carly McVeigh, Senior Director at OCALI. My email address is carly_McVeigh@ocali.org. And then Lisa can be reached. Again, it's Lisa Zelvey, Coordinator of Pupil Support Services from Sycamore Community Schools. She can be reached at zelvyl@sycamoreschools.org. If you would like to learn more about PBIS and are looking for some additional resources, you can always visit the Ohio Department of Education website. I'll give you that URL now. It's https://education.ohio.gov/topics/supports/Ohio-PBIS. All right. Thank you all for joining us. Please stay on with us because we're going to have a live Q&A with Lisa. Hello.
Hi.
We're back.
Great.
All right. So we typically spend just a few minutes after these sessions just seeing if anybody has questions in the chat. And if not, I always have additional questions that we didn't get to in the initial segment. So I'm going to just take a peek here. It doesn't look like we have anything. So I'll get us started though. Lisa, I think one of the questions we didn't get to when we were talking earlier was about data, but specifically the data management system. So a lot of schools take a variety of different approaches. Some of them are really manual. Some of them are more digitally oriented. Sometimes they try out an approach here, but district-wide, it's too difficult to implement. I think you've been on some of that similar journey. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like, what have you done within your district?
Yeah, we've got 7 buildings and we're actually a mixed bag on that right now. We're not all using the same tool. And I don't know that that's ever something that we will mandate or require because we want to make sure that the tool fits the needs of each building. So currently, kindergarten through 6th grade, we are using a tool called PBIS Rewards. And our elementary buildings are kindergarten through 4th, and then we have a 5th and 6th grade building. And they really like the tool. We originally invested in that because it had a good referral system tool that was very user friendly, and it gave you access to instant graphs so you could look at where kids were struggling. And then when COVID hit, they actually embraced the digital positive acknowledgement tool that came with that, which was actually its original purpose when it was created. And so those K-6 buildings really like that tool, and we found it to be very user friendly. In our 7th through 12th grade, it's a combination right now of Google and using Dazzle. Dazzle is our student information system, and you can absolutely pull reports out of it. Our Google form, we were able to create some questions that have a little bit more depth to them, maybe a little bit more teeth in the descriptions. But those 7 through 12 buildings are really in their early stages of implementation, so they really didn't want to invest in a tool before they could truly understand their needs.
Yeah, and I think if I remember correctly from one of the conversations we've had, one of the issues that your teams at the high school level have been really trying to figure out is how do they make more consistent those descriptions or the categories, right? So if you have an classroom managed behaviors versus office referrals, right? Like, what does this actually mean? And how is this thing different from this thing? Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I can't imagine your district is alone in that.
No, I think probably one of the easiest examples I can give you is around the concept of skipping. So our high school has a principal, 3 assistant principals, a dean of students, and what I would consider kind of a different learning community. It's not an alternative school, but we have a more digital-based learning community that kids go to that we call Aves Academy. And we have a person who oversees that as kind of an administrator there. So lots of hands in the pot, if you will, who are reporting on discipline. So when we looked at our data, it showed that we had a big problem with skipping. Okay, well, then I noticed we had different codes. We had skipping, we had out of location, and we had class skip, I think was the 3rd one. So the question was, what do those 3 things mean? And what we found was each person was putting in a similar offense differently or using those codes for different offenses. Well, then you really don't know. Are kids just showing up 5 minutes late? Are kids out of the building and that's out of bounds? Or out of location means you're supposed to be in math, but you were in the cafeteria. So we've really had to have some conversations around, like, we have data, which is great, but we actually can't problem solve around that data because we don't know what it means yet. So they have had some intentional conversations around, how do we want to code things? What does this mean versus what does this mean when looking at putting data into any tool, right? Whether that's PBIS Rewards or Dazzle or a Google Sheet, you have to have common definitions for your administrators in addition to your teachers.
Right. And something else that I remember observing directly within that group was also just this idea of, what are some of these kind of more subjective categories? So what does it mean when we say a student is disobedient, right? And I think there were multiple terms that were categories.
Yes, disruptive, disobedient. What does that
mean? Exactly. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's an interesting conversation on a lot of different levels, right? Because you've got some of the implicit bias that your teams have been talking about as well. So just, wherever you want to go with that.
Well, I think one of the best activities that I've seen some of our buildings engage in is that definition of behavior, right? It's featured in the Tier 1 tiered fidelity inventory, and it really talks about clearly defined student behaviors. So what we did was we encouraged our buildings to take a look at their code of conduct, take your code of conduct violations, and then give descriptors to your staff so that everyone knows and understands. If you want to code it as disrespect in your system, that's fine, but know specifically what that means. What does that look like? What does that sound like? you can't list every behavior in a data tracking tool. You will exhaust yourself, right? And teachers don't want to look at a list of 98 possibilities because they want to click 19 of them because the kid did all of it, right? So we really said, okay, if we want to look at disrespect as a category, describe it in your teacher managed and office managed flowchart so that it's clearly defined. We define disrespect in major and minor ways. And so we know when we're looking at our data that the kids committed one of these behaviors, if you will, not committed, but engaged in one of these behaviors, if you will. And those are the behaviors we need to address. But we really tried to come up a level and said, we're not going to have a skills group, if you will, at tier 2, specifically for kids who use inappropriate language. Our skills group is going to be around what is respectful behavior. And we're going to talk about everything from body language, spoken language, physical presence, respect of property. Those are all things under that category. And so we felt comfortable. So a lot of the buildings said, we feel comfortable saying like we have a problem with disrespect, or we're doing extremely well with disrespect, right? Our students are showing respect in the building. But if we need to dig further, either to complement or to reteach, we have those behavioral descriptions in our teacher managed flowchart.
Right. And ultimately, that is the purpose of data, right? It's to shape the adult behavior to support the student behavior, right?
Right. Our
Okay,
conversations are not around the kid problem. It's around what can we as adults do to help with the fact that they're not meeting our expectations behaviorally.
All right, so it is 4:30. I haven't seen any additional questions. We're supposed to wrap up now, and I really do want to respect everybody's time. So thank you to those who have joined us today. I am going to add a survey link here so that you can let us know what you think. And if you have any additional questions coming out of this discussion, again, there were 2 email addresses provided as well in this session. And so please don't hesitate to reach out. We really appreciate your time. Lisa, thank you for your time. I always enjoy interacting with you. You guys are doing some great stuff there.
Me too. Thanks. It was my pleasure.
All right. Thank you all. Take care.
Thanks for participating in today's webinar. We provided a link in the chat to a brief survey, and we'll also follow up by email with the same link and additional information about this series. This series is for you, and we welcome any feedback. By completing the survey, you'll be able to access a certificate verifying your attendance in this webinar. This recording and related resources will be available on demand through our website, ocali.org. There, you'll also find upcoming and past episodes of InspirED, and you can keep the conversation going on social media. Find us at OCALI Official on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and by using the hashtag InspirEdOhio. As we move forward together in virtual learning, our connections help to inspire success. InspirED Virtual Learning Series.